After the uneasy tension that had been building throughout the evening, the two were already preparing to disappear from the gathering when Jay noticed them heading out together. His first instinct was to follow, especially after everything that had happened between them. But before he could take a single step, Mikasa stopped him. She immediately pointed out how suspicious it would look for a man and a woman to slip away together this late at night, only for Jay to chase after them. In her mind, this was the perfect opportunity to give the two some privacy. Jay couldn't help remembering that Mikasa had been the same person who previously told him to step in whenever things between Taehaa and Rosie became too tense. Now she was doing the exact opposite and telling him to stay out of it. Mikasa then decided that there was no reason for either of them to remain at the party. She grabbed Jay by the hand and started pulling him away, leaving him completely confused about where she intended to take him. A short while later, Taehaa and Rosie found themselves standing together on a rooftop beneath the quiet night sky. Being called away alone at such a late hour clearly amused Rosie. Rather than looking nervous, she treated the situation almost like an exciting secret meeting. She even joked about how dangerous Taehaa could be, especially considering how casually he accepted drinks from people without worrying about what might be inside them. But Taehaa had no interest in playing along with her teasing. He reminded Rosie of the question she had asked earlier about whether he was seeing someone. This time he gave her a direct answer. Yes, there was someone in his life. And unlike the casual relationships Rosie might have expected from him, Taehaa had absolutely no intention of entering a relationship only to walk away when things became inconvenient. His words immediately changed the mood. Rosie simply asked what that meant for her. Taeha's response was blunt. He wasn't giving her a chance because there was no place for her beside him. Whatever hopes she had been holding on to, he wanted her to understand where she stood before she misunderstood the situation any further. But Rosie refused to accept that answer. Instead of backing away, she made her own position clear. She wasn't interested in settling for someone beneath her expectations. If she was going to choose a man, she wanted someone who had more power, more influence, and more status than she did. Someone capable of taking her somewhere that nobody else could reach. She wanted to climb higher, not end up beneath someone who didn't know how much she already had. Her confidence made it obvious that Taeha's rejection hadn't weakened her determination. If anything, it seemed to make her even more stubborn. Taehaa listened without showing much emotion. Then, without warning, he reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. Rosie watched him with visible confusion as he made a call. The person on the other end was his mother, who happened to be taking a shower at the time. Her irritation was immediate. She questioned why Taehaa felt entitled to call whenever he wanted, and complained about how tired she was of hearing him address her as his mother. Taehaa ignored the sarcasm. Instead, he calmly brought up the situation that had led to this entire encounter. Someone had apparently decided to arrange a woman for him after accusing him of being a womanizer, and Taehaa clearly had no interest in accepting the arrangement. His mother didn't seem particularly surprised by his attitude. Taehaa then made his position unmistakable. He didn't need the woman who had been arranged for him, and he wanted his mother to take her back. He had no intention of spending another moment dealing with someone he had never wanted in the first place. If his mother insisted on pushing the matter, Taehaa was prepared to cancel the rest of his schedule and return to Korea immediately. That finally made the conversation more serious. His mother questioned whether Taehaa was actually willing to defy her. For once, there was no hesitation in his answer. Taehaa even pointed out the irony of her expecting him to behave like an obedient son when that had never been the kind of man she wanted him to become. His mother's response was far harsher. She reminded him that his father had once needed her, and that was why the two of them had come together in the first place. Then she turned the conversation toward Taeha's own position within the family. According to her, Taehaa was an illegitimate child who had been raised outside the family. In her eyes, someone in his position should be grateful that a woman of such standing was even willing to consider being with him. She warned him that he could never know when he might need that kind of connection. For a moment, Taeha's expression remained completely unreadable. Then he answered with a layer of sarcasm. He hadn't realized his mother cared quite so much. The concern she was showing for her son was almost touching, but Taehaa wasn't backing down. He assured her that he would be fine without that kind of help. In fact, he was confident that dealing with his older brother wouldn't be particularly difficult either. That statement was dangerous enough to make his mother question whether he would eventually regret saying it. Taehaa didn't. He stood by every word. His mother then warned him that once he returned, she would tell his father everything. Taehaa simply ended the call. The rooftop fell silent again. He turned back toward Rosie and made it clear that the two of them were unlikely to be going anywhere together again. If Rosie was searching for some kind of perfect match, some imaginary glass slipper that would complete the picture, then she needed to find another man. For Taehaa, the conversation was over. He gave her one final farewell, telling her that they might see each other again in Korea, or perhaps never at all. With that, the distance between them became unmistakable. While Taehaa and Rosie remained on the rooftop, the party below continued as if nothing had happened. Jay and Mikasa were back among the crowd, surrounded by people who were drinking, laughing, and enjoying themselves. Jay looked around at the carefree atmosphere and couldn't help thinking about how easy life seemed for everyone there. The young masters had always been incredibly diligent, yet here they were, traveling all the way across the world, only to spend their time partying. To Jae, it made no sense. If this was all they intended to do, they could have stayed in Korea. Mikasa seemed to agree. She found the entire situation painfully boring, and wondered why anyone would travel such a long distance just to waste time on something like this. Jae then noticed Mikasa opening a cigarette box to smoke. He watched as she stood in front of him with her hands ready for him to light it, quietly thinking about what a chain smoker she really was. Rosie told him to light it already. Rosie took a slow drag and stood there calmly, while Jae found himself staring at her longer than he intended. Rosie noticed. She immediately questioned what he was looking at. Jae quickly denied that anything was wrong. Then, almost without thinking, he told her that smoking suited her. Rosie wasn't sure whether that was supposed to be an insult. Jae clarified that he meant it as a compliment. The exchange was brief, but something about the moment seemed to stay with him. For an instant, his thoughts drifted back to the strange outing he had gone through earlier, before his attention was pulled elsewhere. When Jae eventually made his way toward the rooftop, Taehaa was already there. Taehaa looked at him and casually remarked that he looked good. From his expression, it almost seemed as though he already knew Jae had been enjoying himself. Jae immediately became suspicious. He couldn't understand how Taehaa could sound so certain about where he had been and what he had been doing. For a moment, he wondered whether Taehaa had secretly arranged for someone to follow him. But Taehaa dismissed the idea. He claimed that he was only making a guess. Jae couldn't help joking that Taehaa seemed so unnaturally lucky that, in another life, he should simply guess the winning numbers and become even richer. Taehaa laughed. Then his expression became more serious. He called Jae by name and gave him an unexpected instruction. Jae was to return to Korea ahead of him. The request immediately made Jae suspicious. Something about Taeha's tone suggested that this wasn't simply about travel arrangements. Taehaa then revealed the real reason. He wanted Jae to keep a close eye on Nae-soo. He was counting on him. The reason was simple, but deeply personal. Taehaa was afraid that Nae-soo might eventually leave him and be drawn back toward her former husband. And yet Taehaa knew this reunion hadn't happened by accident. In fact, he had planned it himself. He had deliberately set everything in motion, knowing that this meeting would eventually become unavoidable. Jae might be able to accept the situation calmly, but Taehaa already knew that he couldn't. Because no matter how carefully he had planned this reunion, there was one thing he couldn't control: his own feelings. And while Taehaa was preparing to return to Korea, with that fear weighing heavily on his mind, somewhere else, another man was about to receive news that could completely change the situation. Muncheol's phone suddenly rang. The caller had information about the wife who had disappeared from his life. The search might finally be over. But if the caller was right, Taehaa might already be running out of time.